You may want a religious education or one inconsistent with your values. And for a long time, that was the big fight in school choice. But now the Supreme Court of the United States has said, no, it's not an establishment of religion. There's no coercion. Nobody has to go. Everybody gets a choice and they can decide what they want. What that is the free exercise of religion.
Welcome to the Napa Legal Podcast. I'm Joseph Clement, Content and Program Manager at Napa Legal. This is an exciting special guest episode where we're joined by Allan Parker of the Justice Foundation. Allan has spent much of his career fighting for school choice and for the protection of the unborn. Today, I'll be focusing on Texas's new school choice program, which is the largest in the country. So, Allan, thank you so much for joining us. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be with you. I am really excited about the issue of school choice. During the first 7 years of my legal career, I represented public school districts. And then about 1981, after I was been out of law school practicing, I was a partner in a law firm in Corpus Christi, Texas. I gave my life to the Lord and said, whatever you want me to do, I'll do from this point on, and had a number of dramatic changes, one of which I became a professor of law at St. Mary's University School of Law in San Antonio, Texas. And as a law professor, you have to write articles. I got there in 1991 or a little earlier, I was there, but then I started writing. And school choice was a big issue. And at that time, even liberal institutions like the Brookings Institution agreed that public schools were doing a terrible job of educating certain students. There were some who could excel in a public school system. The really good students with good support could do well, probably could do well anywhere. And but particularly minority students and students whose academic skills weren't good, they were just falling through the cracks in huge numbers. Something had to be done. So there were a lot of articles being written about the question we're going to talk about today. Is it constitutional for a government to set up a system where some of the funding ends up at the request of parents in private schools? And is that an establishment of religion, or is that the free exercise of religion? So I wrote a law review. I started researching the Texas Constitution to do a state-specific article. And to my surprise, when I studied the 1876 Constitution of the state of Texas, which is still the one we're with, though a kind of funny matter is we've had at least 200 amendments to the Texas Constitution. We believe in frequently amending it if it needs amendment, but not by the court, by the people. So in my study, I found not only would there be permission, in the sense it would be permissible under our state constitution to have a school choice system, I felt it was actually a requirement, that was the original understanding of the 1876 Texas Constitution. Why do I say that? I'll just give you the brief part of the Constitution that explains why we set up a constitutionally funded education system. It said, a general diffusion of knowledge being essential for the liberty of the people, it shall be the duty of the legislature to establish and maintain a suitable and efficient system of public free schools, right? So what's the purpose of education? To promote liberty through a general diffusion of knowledge. Everybody should be educated well, or at least up to a general level enough to function, as a free member of a liberty-loving society. And they said it should be suitable and efficient, and efficiency is the opposite of a government monopoly. And our constitutional founders knew that so much that they put a separate clause saying that perpetuities, things that go on forever, and monopolies are opposed to the genius of a free people, and therefore shall be prohibited forever. So why we create a government monopoly when our Constitution says that? And the third thing, if you notice the language when I spoke it, it was public free schools, not free public schools. And a public free school was more like public in the sense of public accommodations today. It was actually run privately, but anybody could go to it, just like anybody could stop in a hotel and get a room. If you wanted to put your child in the school, you just enrolled them. And any group of parents could start their own school and apply to the government and hire a teacher and apply to the government of Texas for per pupil funding. That's how they work. So that's the antithesis of a government monopoly. In fact, in Texas history, there was an article in 1954 where the the teachers' unions wrote an article saying, we finally achieved central control and a centralized system in Texas, and now we're going to go on to great heights. But instead, shortly thereafter, academic achievement began to decline because monopolies don't change when they don't do a good job. The point of a monopoly and the teachers' union, despite the fact that there's many good-hearted people in it, and I call those educational heroes, the general human nature is to do less for more money. That's what people who become employees of a government monopoly want to do. That's human nature. I don't call them particularly evil, but the ones who try to do a good job in the system do it. So I wrote an article in the Southwest Law Journal, which is Southern Methodist University School of Law. Somebody called and said, would you litigate for that? And I said, well, why don't you go get the Institute for Justice doing it? They're one of the national experts. They were litigating against Illinois and California at the time under state constitution theory. And the people came back and said, well, would you be interested? Would you do it here? And I said, well, we'd need about $100,000 for that. Well, and 2 weeks later, they had the money. And so we started right around the same time, a little time passage, I was asked to interview for the job as Texas Public Policy Foundation president, which was a very important think tank starting up then and very important still in Texas. And I went there and I said, well, we've got $100,000. Would you be interested in starting a justice foundation? And that's what we did. And I wanted to call it the Texas Legal Foundation because I'd been educated at the University of Texas Law School. And they didn't teach me much about justice, really. And so somebody else had that name. And my wife said, why don't you call it, at that time, the Texas Justice Foundation? And that name was open. So we did. And that's how we got started in 1993 as the Justice Foundation. And then, so in 93, we sued on behalf of low-income Hispanic families from San Antonio. And by then, the Texas Supreme Court had already equalized the funding, and we're for equal funding. Every child per category of child should get the same funding. It may be that a special needs child needs a little more, a general education student can be educated for less. But generally speaking, funding should be equal. So we litigated. And in that case, the Texas Supreme Court, which at that time had been taken over by Republican judges who have more of a status quo protection viewpoint than a fundamental originalist approach. This was 1991. And most conservative judges, even if they were conservative, would tend to preserve whatever the liberals had done. The liberals had taken the word efficiency and ruled that meant everybody should get the same money, when that was totally not the mindset of 1876. But the liberal judges didn't care what the people said in their constitution. Liberal judges want to create a judicial oligarchy. And by that, they mean we're the judges, we know best. And when we think we see a better way to do things, we'll incorporate it into the Constitution by judicial opinion. Well, that's not what the Declaration calls deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's an oligarchy of the elites, not elected by the people, not accountable to the people. But so the Texas Supreme Court said, well, we're not going to force the legislature to do it, but you're right that even though the Texas legislature currently provides education through school districts and a state agency, There's nothing in the Texas Constitution that requires them to do that. As long as there's a general diffusion of knowledge, the legislature can choose any means that it wants to deliver that. So that opened the door. That was a 94 decision in the school finance litigation at that point, round 4. And in 1995 was the next session of the Texas legislature. Governor George Bush was governor at that time. He championed it, and even a Democrat lieutenant governor named Bob Bullock, he also championed it because even he had seen how bad public education monopolies were for poor children particularly, and really all children. But he wanted to do something about it. And he was a kind of a crusty guy. And what we could push through at that time was the creation of a new kind of school. It was called an open enrollment charter school. And what is that? It's one that was called a public school, but it was run by nonprofit organizations with non-governmental employees and more freedom in the curriculum. But any student could apply. If there were more students than places, there was a lottery to see who could get in, and then the funding followed the child to whatever school they selected, whichever one of these. These charter schools didn't have the ability to tax people. They couldn't pass bonds. How could they create schools? People used to ask me this. I said, educational heroes, which I had seen in the school system as the school lawyer for 7 years. One of the worst jobs I had was when they said, we want to fire this teacher. And I'd look over the file saying, well, you don't have enough evidence that this is a bad teacher. Well, who's going to, and I say, you create a remedial plan and then try again next year. Well, who suffers during that year with the bad teacher that's so bad they want to fire the teacher, but they can't. We don't need teacher protection. We need student protections in the schools. And I hated to see that, but I had to do that legally at that time. But educational heroes would go out, and if they had a plan that was good enough to convince parents to believe it, then they could start a school and they'd go to a bank and get a line of credit and say, hey, they could do some initial offerings to see who might be interested. So would you like this school? And that's what they did. They got private funding. Why? Because this is just a service. We have service economies all over. The fact that teaching is not rocket science just shows you that many moms with 8th grade educations have done a great job educating, say, K through 5 or 6th grade. And even more moms with college degrees. You know, if you get a good curriculum, it's not rocket science. It takes love, discipline, and a good curriculum and attention to detail. So anyway, we started that, and I was appointed by the State Board of Education to the Open Enrollment Charter Evaluation Committee. The legislature wanted to do it. Well, immediately schools sprang up, and what did they have? Waiting list to get in. People wanted to get out of the public school they were assigned to because of their neighborhood, and our neighborhoods were hugely racially segregated. Why? Not so much by skin color, but by income, which resulted in racial segregation in the public schools, because we had a choice system if you could afford it. How did you have to afford it? You would move into the school districts that were better because there was a better school. There's not every school, public school is bad. I'm not against good public schools. I'm for them. That's what people want. But in Texas, the good schools draw more people to those neighborhoods who want to put their kids in there, and the prices of the homes go up. And so you have to buy a nice neighborhood to get a better school under that old system. That's part of what we were breaking down. And eventually we got a huge number of charter schools, and yet but the sad defect of that one was they put a limit on the number of schools because they didn't want to hurt the public schools. But So we still have a waiting list of hundreds of thousands of kids to get into those schools. And now, though, by the grace of God, Texas has just adopted and signed into law and is about to implement, or they've started implementing it. And the first batch of students will be selected this spring. They'll get enrolled in public and private schools May and June, and then they'll start in the fall. So it's an exciting time in Texas to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And right off the bat, I love your perspective of how a government monopoly on public education of children is definitely far from the most efficient way to bring up our kids. And I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about this particular program. How does this do a better job of offering students a future where they're able to have an education that is more tailored to them, and it doesn't leave behind any of our students, but especially like you had said with the public system, that it often tends to target the most is low-income families. So I'd love to hear a bit about how this particular program is rectifying a lot of the issues that you pointed out.
All right. Well, this program is called a Universal Education Freedom Program. It's Texas Education Freedom Accounts. And it's designed to set up for as many eligible children as the Texas legislature will fund. And they put $1 billion into this new program. And that's probably enough for about 100,000 students. And that's not a bad thing to start out with, because inertia keeps people in their public schools for a while. One of the big criticisms was, well, if you give everybody a choice, the public schools will fail, which is a horrible indictment by the teachers against their own school. You mean if we let people go, they'll go? Why should we force them to stay? But, people want a gradual change, and that's okay. So I'll just sort of glance through this and read a couple of these things. The application deadline is March 17th, and we already have almost 150,000 children enrolled. It's the largest school choice rollout in the U.S. history. They've always been, you're going against the huge inertia and powerful lobbying arm of the public school system, the teachers' unions, the superintendents, everybody. And if you have a job where you get the same amount of money or more every year, whether you do a good job or bad job, wouldn't you like to keep that job? I mean, but that's human nature again. I'm just saying that. And it's not first come, first serve. Everybody had from about early February to March to enroll. And on March 17th, the enrollment period ends, and you can enroll on the Texas Comptroller of Education's website. And we chose the Comptroller of the Education System to be the director of this because he has a purely financial function. It's not, whereas if you assign this to a commissioner of education in some state, he's grown up in the government monopoly system with a mindset, it's my job as the top-down person to run this system and regulate the heck out of it. That the answer to a problem in the public school system with the government monopoly is, oh, we got to do something about it. Let's pass a law. The law passes and nothing changes. I taught education law at St. Mary's University too, and I've monitored across the country. That's the blob effect. Oh yeah, we'll pass a law. I'll give you just an example. Discipline is a terrible problem in Texas schools, all across, as it is all across the nation, because the school districts, the students are the lowest rung of priority in terms of what you've got to do. If a student gets beat up, you can have hundreds of assaults at your school and still stay in existence and get more money the next year as pay raises go up. Or if you want to complain about the bullying problem, you go and get another $300, $500 million from the legislature to fix the bully problem. There'll be bully training, bully reports, bully monitors, and no control of the system, which can be easily controlled if you disciplined the students right at the beginning. But they've lost control. But the law's there, and if a teacher is a disruptive student, they have the right to remove that student from their classroom. But what teachers have found is if you do that, then you get dinged badly on your evaluations for your inability to control the classroom. And you don't get back up for the principal. So I've talked to lots of teachers about this, and many teachers have come to love this and feel I could do a better job and start a new school. That's what's happened. The ones who look around and grieve when they see the children not learning, when they see little girls afraid to go to school, when they're crying to go to school, when they're afraid to be in school, and little boys too. Then, and the principals won't back them up because it takes a hearing, it takes a discipline hearing, sometimes an alternative education program. It takes a lot of resources to do that. And they're just other priorities. So, but this program then is great in that sense. And they're encouraging everyone to sign up because even if you don't get in this year, this program hopefully will be expanded next year in the Texas legislature. So far as I know, I've studied this, every educational choice program has expanded because parents love it. It gives and let me give you an example of how this controls the bullying problem. If one little girl, little boy is bullied and goes to the school district and complains about it, and the school district says, well, we've talked to Billy, won't happen again. Then it happens again, and the child begins to feel unsafe. They could just take their child now and go to another school, get $10,000 for general education students, which is still less than we would pay for that child in public school. So there's a savings to the state. And if it's just one person, then nothing changes at the school. Maybe they don't have a bully problem. Your child was just picked on. But if suddenly 5, 10 students start leaving, the administrators, I guarantee you, and it's happened everywhere, will say, why are you leaving? Because my child doesn't feel safe. And then the administrators have to say, we're going to lose funding if we don't fix the problem. And they can fix the problem in a variety of ways. They can start enforcing school discipline. Because if you have a nation of unruly children who can't control themselves and have never been controlled by the public school system, you'll see what we're seeing in our society. Lawlessness, crime, assaults on one another. And I believe, and I think many parents believe, they want a school system that teaches morality. So this will allow morality to be taught also. And people ask me, well, can the private schools be controlled? No, we put it, that is a great danger of school choice programs because, and I tell people you have to be ever vigilant against it. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. So it's a threat, but this bill specifically says the comptroller can't make any academic regulations. He can't control admissions. His job is to set up the financial accounts. Each parent will get a financial ESA. Then they can apply to the school that they want to go to. There's a private contract between the school. It may be that they're a college preparatory school. The school doesn't have to change and take everybody because they'll explain to the parent, this is a college prep. Your child may think this is very hard. Is your child ready for this? Is this the school that's best for you? If your child's 3 years behind school level, like many are in public schools, you may want to go to a remedial school first. That'll help him get caught up. It's your choice. But that sounds like creaming, but that's not what it is. There should be a school for everybody. But that doesn't mean every school has to meet every child's needs. Public schools have drama and art schools, and they audition to see who gets in. You can have an academic school, and you may want a religious education or one inconsistent with your values. And for a long time, that was the big fight in school choice. And recently, so the argument for that is, oh my, this money's ending up in private schools. The program is no private school money is directed to the private school directly. There's no direct payment. And there is great evil in funding the suppliers. That's why government contracts can be bad. And they might have to the Catholic schools are better than the Protestant schools, or vice versa. Let's give all the money to those schools. And you can look into religious discrimination. But the reason it was finally upheld by the Supreme Court, that this is not an establishment of religion. No, this is a general benefit. equally available to all the students of Texas. Eventually it will be, and right now anybody that gets in can win the lottery and get it. But it's equally available in theory to all students. And it's the parents' decision where the money goes. The liberal argument is so extreme that you could make it to apply to two things, which show its ludicrousness. One would be, a lot of people get government benefits like Social Security. A lot of people, we know it, tithe on their money. So they take 10% of that government check and they put it in the pot or online to their local church. Is the government supporting religious schools? We could give everybody the money, but forbid them from using it at churches. That'd be crazy. The other argument is, if a church gets on fire, they can call the fire department, and get fire control, because that's available to everybody. Even though that's a direct and substantial benefit to the church to put the fire out before it burns the whole building down. You want fire protection is a great benefit to you if you get it. And the people who don't want the churches to get any public benefit took that extreme argument. But now the Supreme Court of the United States has said, no, it's not an establishment of religion. There's no coercion. Nobody has to go. Everybody gets a choice and they can decide what they want. What that is the free exercise of religion. And as you know, there's two clauses about religion in the Constitution. The government shall not establish a religion, nor shall they deny the free exercise. So when you say every Texas child gets money for their education, except people with religious values who believe their children must be educated in the things of God as they understand those things, and you don't give them the money, you're discriminating. And the Supreme Court has made 3 or 4 great decisions in this area now where it is wide open for school choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you brought up a lot of the kind of the criticisms against something like this. And this is really what came up in the Carson v. Macon line of cases, is that is a neutral support of government is a neutral governance support of religious organizations a violation of the Establishment Clause. Time and time again, we've seen, no, it's clearly not. We spoke actually briefly before recording about the Louisiana 10 Commandments case recently, and there was a great concurrence in there written by Judge Ho. And he went through and explained some of the history of both public schools in America and the Establishment Clause itself. And there's a great line that I just want to read very briefly from. He said that our nation's founders didn't just permit religion in education, they presumed that there would be religion in schools. So this neutral support of religious organizations, and the money's going to parents who then spend it here. In no way could this be kind of construed as an establishment problem.
That's exactly right. And in this 250th year of the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, just thinking about the Declaration that most people know, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these is the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, including life, liberty, and property, pursuit of happiness kind of got in as property into the Constitution. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a good segue into kind of taking the conversation where we've gotten to talk a lot about the program itself and address some of the establishment now defunct, but it's always good to kind of make sure we're solid on these things, claims against a bill like this. When we started moving the conversation a bit into originalism and how an originalist court should uphold a thing like this under a correct understanding of establishment, I'd love to hear just a little bit more from you about how does school choice kind of play into the larger conservative and, in the courts, originalist movement? Why should somebody that describes themselves as conservative care about expanding school choice? Is this bigger than kind of a niche thing that only affects parents with young kids? Is this something that the average conservative or religious liberty proponent should care about?
Well, thank you for that question. That's very insightful. And all of us must care about education. As even the Texas Constitution said in 1876, a general diffusion of knowledge is essential to the preservation of liberty. And there's this contrary impulse by people who want to concentrate all power in the government because they want their way to be the only way taught. The left in America has gone quite heavily into that type of authoritarian, meaning that we know what's right. We're going to impose our will on everybody. And they've done it successfully a lot in education. I think I saw a recent survey that most students coming out of the public high schools support socialism and communism, which are the direct opposite to the type of freedom system and government by the people. If you're going to divide up all the property, then you have to have a massive government system that can kill people that don't cooperate with confiscation of their property and suppression of their rights and their liberty to speak out.
Yeah, I love the perspective of, an authoritarian government isn't going to let people go take whatever school they want to go to. So if we have this kind of fundamental protection of you have the freedom to go to the school that you know is going to be best for you, then that kind of cuts back against really any other government attempt to start reaching into smaller and more private parts of your life. So I think kind of the basic concept of school choice as a way to protect fundamental basic liberties is a great perspective.
Yeah, and just recently, as we're speaking, I don't know when it'll air, when someone will watch this, but it's fairly recent. The Supreme Court just blocked California's rule. Talk about oppressive and domineering and authoritative and an intrusion on parents' fundamental rights. They just blocked from going into effect California's public school rule that if your child wanted to call themselves by another pronoun or change their sexual identity and even begin to get medical treatment, the child could do that without parental consent. And if they told the public school they didn't want their parents to know, the parents could be not told about it and even lied to about it. If they start asking, well, is anything going on with my child? She seems depressed and sad at home. And it's because she may have gender dysphoria, and something parents should know about and get treatment as they want to see. So, but that would have been considered unimaginable probably 25 years ago, certainly as 50 years ago, and we didn't have a big election about it. It was imposed on us by academic and government elites, as in the school district. They decide what they want to impose on children and parents. And because they control all the parents and all the school district in the community, 90% of them at least, they can control the mindset of the entire culture. And that's what public school monopoly does. But I'm not, I think good competition could stop that. Because if that happened in most schools, even in liberal California, half the parents would leave and take the funding with them. The school would not do that. They'd try to hide it better or something. But really, they'd have to be responsive to parents. It makes the parents responsible in the system and a stakeholder, as they like to call the people. They don't list parents as a stakeholder in most places. They've started doing a little bit under school choice. But the people with the real power are the superintendents. We used to do training for school board members, and I've done lecturing at the Texas Association of School Boards in the past and everything. And basically, you're trained to be a lapdog by TASB, which is sit in the lap, get pieces of information, stroked and made to feel important, but don't interfere with the operation of the district. This is the way we do it. This is the way the establishment does it, and you'll get swatted down. Whereas our training was be a watchdog. You don't have to growl every time, but your job is not to be a lapdog. Your job is to keep an eye out for people and guard the ones that need guarding when there's something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I love seeing that Mirabelli decision come out. So I can't wait to kind of see if that impacts other cases like it before the court now. So just before we wrap up, I'd love to hear any closing remarks, anything we haven't touched on that you think is important to, or that you make sure we want to bring up.
I think everybody should celebrate this. Even if you would not put your child in a private school of a particular religion, and all religions will be allowed, except those that perhaps teach killing, that's part of their religion, or that they should do child sacrifices as part of their religion. things that violate the moral order, they might not be able to participate. But we generally know, and we've become a Christian nation with religious liberty. And I would argue that's the best kind of society to live in. No society will ever be perfect, but your property, your life, you'll have great freedom, including the freedom to worship as you choose. And it's really a bit of religious bigotry if you oppose someone spending their share of the public money at a religious school. And it'd be good to become more tolerant and be open-minded about others. Most of the private schools that we've had have graduated thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably millions of good citizens who participate fully and profitably in the economic and social life of our nation.
Absolutely. Great. Well, Allan, thank you again so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure to get a chat about this bill in Texas and just about school choice more generally and why it's so important for not even just people that are actually going to take advantage of it, but more broadly for a society that's free and that values kind of personal freedoms and enabling us to kind of be the best we can be. So thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure getting the chat.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you to Napa.
Great. So to our listeners, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Napa Legal Podcast. If you enjoy the content we're putting out, we would appreciate it if you like this podcast and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you are listening. We hope you join us next week as we continue to highlight and discuss some of the most important ongoing legal issues impacting religious liberty and the work of faith-based nonprofits. Talk to you next week. Thank you for joining us, and God bless.